over the last few years of covering politics, I've definitely become much more like I just tweeted about it, but I used to think that like misinformation and bull was almost exclusively a problem on the right.
Ugh.
And I thought that for like probably like a a decent chunk of the Trump years.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I feel like my positions haven't changed like at all, but I'm just way more wary of online from the left space. It doesn't seem very
I feel like
healthy.
This is kind of where I'm at right now, and it feels really, but I'm pretty sure it's the closest position to true that I think I've been at before. I just don't think anybody politically has very many principles. It's more just kind of like whatever works for this particular argument. You've got like a toolbox in front of you and you pick and choose the tools based on the argument. If you go back from like, I would say maybe 2005 to 2013, the reason why misinformation probably seemed so much bigger on the right than the left is because I think most of the things that the left were arguing for were pretty fact-based. It was hard to make up. Like we're talking about things like equal rights for like gay people and marriage. Some talk about like prison reform or immigration reform, something to do with illegal immigrants, things like climate change, pushing for like higher education, like all things that are like pretty good and like easy to back up. And then on the right, they're just kind of like do their wacky, like, oh, trickle down econ, like dumb like that. Now, in the past, I would have assumed that like, oh, cool. Like, I think the quote we used to say was, reality often has a liberal leaning or a liberal bias. That was like a thing that liberals say. Yeah. And I think that was probably true at that point in time. But now as time has gone on, and now the political narratives on the left have drifted further from reality, rather than what I would hope to see, which is a bunch of people like, whoa, hold on, guys, we're not being very fact-based anymore. Now they're just like, we don't trust science. We don't trust this. We don't trust that. This is probably more blah, blah, blah. And then you find like, oh, so I guess we all just kind of play fast and loose with the facts when they are convenient for us to, which is unfortunate, but yeah.
It's a totally different framework too. Like I've gotten in the habit. I've reviewed a few Second Thought videos in the last like few weeks. Bro,
he is one of the worst content creators on YouTube. I've never seen such a high misinformation per second. Like, oh, sorry.
Oh,
I cut you off. Yeah.
No. It's wild. Like the thing with him though is that he's so confident in his delivery that if you're sort of like a normie or you don't bother to look into things further when people make claims, I could totally understand people sort of taking him at his word, because he delivers things so authoritatively.
They're just like matter of fact, and he's got a good narrative to wrap it all up. Many people don't realize that in the 1950s, the CIA was actually torturing and murdering plenty of black people, and this is why today the black people don't support blah 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 blah. Like it'll say like this, and it all sounds like, oh, he reads like a history book. Yeah, but almost every fact he gives is either wrong or wildly distorted, and then the narratives to wrap it all up are insane. Yeah.
You really have to evaluate him line by line. So you got to like pause the video and address each individual sentence that he so flippantly said that the way that Rome dealt with pandemics was basically not too different from what the United States did with COVID.
Okay. I don't even know if that's true or not, but okay.
There's no way they had literally had leper colonies. Like there's just no like the framework was basically like the rich people just let the poor people die while they, accumulate more money. When I'm pretty sure the opposite is what happened in the United States. Like we had this really comparatively generous stimulus program in this country, and the bottom percentiles of income earners saw their wages rise and their like savings rise like during that time. So he could not have been further from the truth. But yeah, there's just a lot of people like him in the space now, and I feel like they just dominate on Twitter.
Horrible. Yeah. Also on that thing, to be clear, we were either first or maybe second behind Japan in terms of like per capita aid given anywhere in the world. The United States, we gave an ungodly amount of money over COVID. The unemployment insurance, like sometimes you hear things and it's like, oh God, that's just a meme that they blah, blah, blah. I'm pretty sure it was true that there were a decent chunk of people that were making more money on unemployment insurance than they ever made working. Like it was an insane amount of stimulus given out.
No, that's absolutely. It was $600 a week on top of what they were getting with the normal benefits.
It was insane. And then like $2,000 stimulus checks or $1,400, $600. And then the PPP. There was a ton of stimulus being given out.
So this, I don't know, for this cycle, I don't know about you, but I'm really just focused on kind of cutting through all that. And ignoring it to the best of my ability, but then using like calling it out when I feel it's appropriate. Because I feel like the doomer crowd, the crowd that's like they're piggybacking off of this conflict in Israel, for example, to proudly announce that they're not going to vote for Biden.
Yeah,
when really I think that they were just like they were waiting for something like that to happen the whole time, so they could just because they do this every cycle.
Yeah.
And I figured something out, man. I figured out that this is the thing that makes them feel powerful, because like their sort of brand of politics has only just gotten more irrelevant as time has gone on. And this is the way that they sort of psych themselves up and feel like they have some control or feel like they have some influence, not just like on social media, but in like the body politic. And if you just ignore that altogether, and like they want you to like beg them for their vote. And this time around, I'm not going to do that anymore. I did that for like in 2020. I was like literally begging people like, please just think about the outcomes. Yeah. And now I'm like, don't vote. I don't give a do it without you. We've been doing it without you for the last like 3 years straight, as Democrats have been overperforming the polls and just crushing in elections all over the country. So anyways, yeah, that's my my strategy, my mindset right now.
Yeah. It sucks because like the misinformation high ground was like one of the nicest and most comfortable high grounds that I could occupy, but now it's like very, very, very hard. And I've actually made this complaint for quite a while, but like when I go into conversations with people, I have to differentiate myself from a lot of other people on the left immediately because of the propensity to spread misinformation from like all sides now. Like I have to immediately disown like 6 or 7 crazy leftist talking points in order for the person to know that I'm sane. But then it starts to feel like it feels like I'm gaslighting them almost, where it's like, okay, listen, I'm not like this leftist. Because like if a conservative, when they come up and they talk to me and they're like, okay, well, I don't support Trump, I just want you to know this, like I almost never believe them. Like, bull, you deep throat Trump every day on your Twitter feed. I know you do.
Yeah.
So, there are so many individual things that Trump did that if any Democrat did it, Republicans would be marching with AR-15s. I can't. I can't. Oh my God.
They're so good at keeping narratives alive. Like, so the big one that I've noticed that has endured for 5 years now and I'm sure some people in your chat, if you're like Trump, if they're Trump fans, they'll probably think like that this is true. But when Biden went to Ukraine and pressured them to fire the Shokin prosecutor guy, that the IMF wanted fired, that the EU wanted fired, that the State Department wanted fired, that members of Congress wanted fired, that was hashed out in the first impeachment trial. It's just been so thoroughly debunked, this idea that he went there to personally lobby them to fire this prosecutor because they were supposedly investigating his son, which there's no evidence of that being the case whatsoever. That has been debunked 10,000 times from 10,000 different angles, and they're still hanging on to that.
But the funny thing is their justification for that is literally that one clip of, by the way, Biden speaking publicly in front of an office saying like, oh, well, I told them I was going to withhold the money and blah, 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 which was, by the way, part of the condition of like the treaty that had been signed or the agreement that had been signed, that money would be released to Ukraine to spend as long as they were doing the appropriate steps to blah, blah, and be like, look, that's Biden meaning. But if you show them a billion different Trump quotes, like, well, Trump didn't mean that. Well, when he called Georgia on that private line and had all this, well, he wasn't really asking for that. Like, you're supposed to, it's not what he says, it's what he means. And like, well, when Trump said that like he knew it was secret and he should have declassified it, he was just like, he was just kind of like using a turn of phrase. And it's like, bro, are you serious? Like, you really want me to treat Trump like a low functioning child in every single statement that he makes? Meanwhile, you are combing through with the like most precise magnifying glass on earth with every single statement. The other part is unbelievable.
I mean, just like in the case of the prosecutor, the most easy way to debunk it is just all you got to do is just point to the fact that the IMF wanted him gone and the EU wanted him gone. So were they in on this conspiracy as well?
Or like why wasn't the whole world? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm just saying, like, were they in on the conspiracy as well, or did it just line up 1-to-1 at the same time?
Yeah.
Like it served Biden's interest and the EU's interest at the same time. You would have to believe one of those things. It's so nonsensical, but they have just gotten so good. I'm talking about the right-wing sort of like media apparatus, like social media and regular media.
I think it's a good question.
Hammering these things.
Yeah, you know? The same point they did at Hillary Clinton for 20 years, whatever. Yeah, I think that it's a really good question. People say like, what about that Biden quote about and like the question is, why didn't literally a single person on the entire planet give when Biden made these comments at the time? Do you ever stop and wonder that? Like, why did nobody care back then? He said it publicly on TV. We all heard it. Why did nobody care back then? It's so dumb.
You would have to have a sort of cartoonishly evil caricature of Biden in your mind as like that's who he is, to think that he would get in front of cameras and brag about like a nakedly corrupt act like that.
Yeah,
like,
but I mean, these people think they do it, right? Because how many times do they quote that stupid op-ed that was written as part of like an IMF conference or whatever, where they're like, "Oh, you'll own nothing and be happy," and it's just like an op-ed of like, here's some potential futures and goods and bads, and people are like, this was the plan. That's the plan all along. Blah 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 blah. And it's like, yeah, remember how many of these great plans never happened? Do you remember how there was supposed to be the great what do they call it after COVID? It was going to be the whole
Great Reset.
Yeah, we remember the Great Reset. Where did that go? Remember people saying they were going to be permanent? Oh yeah, well they don't hold on as much anymore. Where are all the permanent vaccine passports? I thought that was going to be a thing. What was the statement about Canada permanently taking everybody's freedoms away? Like they've given you more freedom now. You can with a hospital, right? Where are these things that were supposed to happen? None of them happened, and they don't get held accountable for any of it. Like where are these people? It's like, bro, you've made all these crazy, outlandish predictions, and none of them came true. What the? Why aren't you held accountable for that? Sorry.
Even in California, I think you didn't leave California until well after this happened, but even in California, they weren't asking for anybody's vaccine card after like 3 months. Like 90% of places that I went. And I think that you were technically even supposed to, like whenever you went to an event or a restaurant or a theater, they were checking people's vaccine cards like in the very beginning, and that lasted literally like 2-3 months. And then after that like everything was basically back to normal. Yeah. Like most people weren't wearing masks. They weren't asking for any kind of like proof that you got vaccinated.
But remember, how many times did you hear, bro, dude, the Patriot Act in Iraq like rotted people's minds? How many times did you hear like, remember the Patriot Act? Every time the government does it, they steal more freedoms. Do you think vaccine passports aren't here to stay? Well, you're an idiot. I'm here to tell you it's going to get even worse. They're going to have passports for all your vaccines. Oh, international travel? That's a thing of the past. You're going to need blah, 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 blah. And it's like, oh, well, crazy that literally none of that happened to be true. But yeah.
Speaking of the Patriot Act, Second Thought made the case that United States is basically as authoritarian as China, if not more. And the thing that he pointed to counter the idea that, like, I mean, obviously in China, their surveillance systems are ubiquitous and incredibly sophisticated and just like everywhere. And his point, the way that he made his point was the Patriot Act. Like, because we passed the Patriot Act, that means that we're basically just as bad as China when it comes to surveilling.
Yep. it's the same.
Even with the Patriot Act, don't you need to get a warrant still with the Patriot Act? Or like, what exactly did they do with that?
I think it's a different process. Is the Patriot Act where FISA courts came from?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so there's like a different...
So.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. FISA was 78 is a different thing. I'm trying to remember what the Patriot Act expanded. I know the Patriot Act, I think, gave more powers to intelligence agencies for domestic surveillance. I don't remember exactly what it expanded there. But yeah, but like this is the Iraq thing. It's the same thing where it's like everybody will always point to the Patriot Act as an example of like, oh, you don't think the United States isn't going to force castration on your child? What about the Patriot Act, right? You can go to the Middle East and it's like, oh, wow, there's a group of 100 people that have like 7 billion citizens. What are you going to do? Well, we should intervene. Like you did in Iraq. Like that's always like people's brains are stuck in like 2003 or whatever, and it's like we're never leaving.
They go back further. They go back further to like the 70s with like.
Oh no, that's lefties. That's tankies. Those are.
Yeah.
I'm just saying for the broader people. Yeah, like people are like Iraq poisoned, mind poisoned. Like Iraq and the Patriot are like the defining foreign policy and domestic policy points in everybody's brain, and that is literally what the last bill that was passed in the U.S. was the Patriot Act, and then like the last foreign policy thing we did was the Iraq War, and that's everything.
Yeah. It's wild because like if you talk about how like Hamas is bad or whatever, like and you point to something like some awful thing that some execution or something like that, oftentimes with like the lefty types on social media, they'll go back to like the Tuskegee Airmen, and like the syphilis experiments from like the 50s, or they'll go back to the 70s with like murdering Fred Hampton. It's like, bro, you had to go back 50 years to try to get a dunk. Like this is incredible. Yeah. Anyways.
I appreciate that, Destiny.
All right, bye.
Remember to hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so that my videos show up right in your feed.